So, usually we work on projects. How do we actually define the shares ownership? How much of the shares we all should own, each of us should own, of the resulting, enterprise or whatever. The Infinity Ledger is a ledger that allows to compute that share. So basically, this is just a table with a single formula that defines there. You see the above here how to compute the shares if you have the work results. So you can have work results, some task, maybe a single task actually may have multiple work results. Like for example, you can say a single task maybe have maybe more work results, and these results maybe just some kind of work results. So you can imagine this is a Trello task name, and maybe there are different work results, or maybe there are different people who show those results. So let's say that a single task is done by by some different people. Let's say Neo, no, not here, Neo, and then Trinity, and then maybe Jack. 3 different people showed the result. You can publish your task maybe on somewhere in the internet, and for each of them you want to maybe pay money or something for the task. What they may do actually, they may say, hey, I think that this task will take 5 hours to me, maybe 3 hours to me, maybe 8 hours to me. And we can have just those estimates. Now another task, maybe task 2, and actually it may have just one person. So let's say and maybe he says that he would like, it would take for him like an 10-hour equivalent of time value, and actually then once you have the results, maybe there's just one result, but it's expensive. It's so Neo actually, when he does spend some, let's say 5 hours, 5 hours remains there remains other the rest of 5. Actually he might want some payments. So let's say there's an investor like Morpheus, and he, let's say, covers the Neo's expenses. Let's say 2 of the 5 hours. So what happens really? Or let's say 1 of the 5 hours. This formula here, copy it over here, actually defines the shares generated. So this is the shares generated is 1. Yeah, the idea is that the shares generated represent the expenses compensated. So expenses compensated out of 5 is just 1. Let's say expenses was much smaller, 0.5. And in this case, it is only possible for Morpheus to compensate 0.5 of the time declared by Neo. In this case, Morpheus only covered 0.5, so this is the this shares are created only 0.5. So basically, what we have is there is one result that that Morpheus and Neo own together in equal parts. Now you can click on the shares and see that the distribution between the Morpheus ownership and Neo are like that. Now suppose that there is some other works. Let's say Trinity did her work completely, and she says that there remains 0 time or investments to spend, and Morpheus compensates her completely. Then actually drag this up here. They could together generate 3 shares, equally shared between Morpheus and Trinity. Now we get the share distribution like that, and this actually now suppose that Neo's result is really maybe needs more investors, not just Morpheus. He maybe needs Oracle or something to invest. So suppose that he already spent 2 hours, and Oracle wants to cover another expense for the second hour, and let's say this is the remaining for him. So you can see that this way Oracle together with Neo generated another one share that they shared equally between each other, and you can see that their share distribution. Now Oracle owns 0.5 and Neo owns 1, which is from here. Now suppose that there is someone else, like a third investor. So you have one-to-many relationship here, optionally for that one result. These actually stocks represent that specific result, and they can take this result into another project if they want to. The value of this specific share is different than the value of this specific share, but because this specific share represents this specific piece of work, maybe this is an engine, maybe this is a windshield, maybe this is something else, like and then people if this object or this, maybe this is like some kind of more important part for the project, then maybe this intrinsic value of the thing will be different, and this share intrinsic value of course will be different. So we don't lose the information about what the shares really represent. They are tied together with the actual things, work results created. Now but if there is another investor, let's say architect, and he thought, oh, I will be very smart and I will just invest 8 to Neo, but actually if you just try to compute, the architect doesn't get any investment. That is because Neo has not yet declared the rest of the time, or of the expenses. If he would start declaring, let's say, expenses like 3, now architect also would together with Neo would generate additional additional equity, and if continuing, now let's say there is some fourth investor who wants to invest into Neo's work result, maybe he is very bullish and he actually says he will invest 10, and he is maybe some like Smith, right? So Dr. whoever the Smith actually wants to invest into that, and he gets 0. Why? Now this is the order of investors. If even if the Neo declares 100% all of his hours, Smith doesn't get anything because he was late to the party. The architect already invested, and Oracle and Morpheus already invested. Now the remainder, well, Smith only could get his additional shares if the Neo would declare more, for example 11, and in this case Smith actually would get some shares, but in case of the Smith doesn't get any shares. Actually, yeah, this is the rules of the game, basically of this kind of investment. And while I just use the time value, you can actually use any currency here that the people agree. It can be dollars, it can be yen, and so on, but I would suggest using just hour, because hour has a very good clear exchange rate. So for example, the exchange rate between 1 hour and the dollar has been very steadily rising since 2006, when it was $20, to 2020 on 19, which is $28.32. It's not fluctuating, it's not jumping around, it's a very clear relationship. So whenever you need to specify some kind of contribution, let's say some specific factory, Now let's say this is not between the Neo and his friends, but actually let's say this is some some factory X. X is providing some glass or some kind of thing, and it costs maybe 100,000, right? Maybe $100,000. And so what you can do is you can divide it by the currency amount, the value of an hour, and just write that number of contribution size. Basically, this is the contribution size. Maybe that party of glass costed $100,000. So this is how we write the $100,000 in hours. And in this case, there was nobody. Well, Factory X has 10 shares because these guys were actually, they added the the money to compensate this. So this is the Factory X. So totally they generate 20 additional shares. All of the investors get 50%, but the original contribution targets another 50%. And thing is that these 20 shares, represent not all the glass added, but only the 20 hours worth of it. So the remaining part is not really owned by anyone else other than Factory X. So Factory X could just say that I'm yet another investor, and I just want to fix that it's mine. Factory X has, let's say, 3531 minus 20, 3511. And in this case, you can see, if the shares of the Factory X maybe has the largest now amount, because they themselves covered the rest. But usually we don't write this part. But if whenever the contributor compensates something themselves, if the investors don't compensate, they automatically get more shares in that piece of in the project, in that piece of work. So basically, these are the rules, and the new shares generated through a process of participants compensating each other's expenses associated with the work results. The default distribution of the new created shares is 50-50 to the doers and investors if the investors cover just the cost of production. And parties actually are free to negotiate differently in all other cases. So thing is that how this is computed. So now the generated shares are here, right? But and if you look at this part, so like it's always divided by 2. It means 50% to one, 50% to another of that created of those generated shares. So you can actually think of it like okay, so in some special case, maybe the cost of so let me go back and remove that large amount by factory, but let's leave that simpler case. So we've got Morpheus actually spent gave 4 hours worth of money to Trinity. But Trinity only spent 3. Now maybe Morpheus is actually saying, okay, I gave you that extra money and you didn't do anything. Actually, Trinity doesn't have any obligation to do anything. It's just like could be just like a tip from Morpheus to give more than the Trinity spends. However, in this case, let's say Morpheus would, since he gave more, he would maybe like to have a little more shares. Maybe they could decide, for example, to change the distribution. For example, let's say to have 2/3 of the result, and Trinity to have 1/3 of the result. Actually, they can just decide to have that kind of different distribution in a very specific case. So unless the parties decide otherwise, it's just 50-50 of the result, because that makes sense. After all, the prices here have to be, it's to be matched with the prices, there in the compensation part. Yeah, and the rights to investment, yes, as I mentioned, are created in the first in, first out order that is as shown. Those who do investment first, they get the actual shares, first. So yeah, this is the principle of how the infinity model works. If you take a look actually on the infinity project, it was like that. So people just had some kind of syntax to show or declare the amount. I would suggest that whenever you do some actual work, you just add a link to your actual work in some system like Trello or Airtable or Jira or any other task management system, and whenever someone compensates for your work, you add the link to the transaction ID or online to that specific transaction, either it's Bitcoin transaction or it's fiat currency transaction, and probably also add the time, so you can actually have like a time, because additionally because the currency values change over time. Though actually, if you add just a link, that is enough, because usually the transactions are dated, so you don't really needed to put the time here. Really, everything is just everything else is in the other external systems. Yeah, this is how I think it makes sense, and maybe the to account for people's work and to generate the actual share distribution. And this, by the way, what is the H hat, H bar, and H dot? So these are just coming the symbols from mathematics. I mean, in mathematics and statistics, we use the estimate to use the hat for estimates of values, so statistics. So not the actual value, but the estimate of it. So that's why we have just estimation of work can go here, and then the currency. Yeah, usually we've got like some currencies like zloty or some with the bar. They kind of often associate with the bars with currencies. So just hour as a currency currency compensated time value, and this is the actual declared time value. So, and the dot is just something that sediments. So sediments is something what like shares are matched up time. So not time, but really value, time value. Yeah. So yeah, this is the. I mean, I suggest that you can try using this system to just see if we do any work and we've got any work results that have URLs or are traceable, we can try to estimate. There's a standard for us as people. There's a standard value of our time. So, for example, if we spend 5 hours on doing something, yeah, we won't probably use the currency of this hourly currency. Let's say I spent 5 hours and my hour value is much larger. Let's say I'm like a higher specialist and my value is $40 per hour. So I can say that I just multiply that by 5 and I get 7 hours instead of, although I spent 5 hours, I can write 7 hours, because that's the value that I feel like this is something that I should be should be worth. And if someone wants to do a work and they think that their work on the market may be worth from $500 or something, they could suggest that their contribution is this and this size. So it's like we don't have to think of these hours as time, but really think of the hours here as currency everywhere. So this is dollars, this is dollars, this is dollars, even if it's just estimate.